Fat Joe just went through something the streets couldn't prepare him for.
Joe, were you kidnapped in Africa?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How much you have to give up for ransom?
The Bronx legend had faced kidnapping, ops, lawsuits, and betrayal, but nothing prepared him for how his autistic son was abandoned.
I go over there, the man don't let us leave. So we supposed to go for one show. We stuck over there for like 2 weeks.
Let me take you back to where it all began. Fat Joe's kidnapping and his son's abandonment. Picture this, you are one of the biggest rappers in the Bronx. You get offered more money than you have ever seen in your entire life to do one single show overseas. You hop on a plane, fly all the way to Luanda, Angola, and the second you touch down, you realize you are not leaving when you want to. That is exactly what happened to Fat Joe, and it was not a movie, it was his real life. Fat Joe sat down with Shannon Sharp on the Club Shay Shay podcast in October 2024 and told this story in full detail for the first time. He explained that he was hired to perform a show in Angola for the biggest payday of his career at that point. The promoter behind the whole thing was an infamous figure named Riquinho, a former warlord who had been appointed the leader of tourism after Angola's civil war ended. His job was to bring international acts to the country. Fat Joe and his crew had no idea who they were really dealing with.
They had this warlord, his name is Riquinho. Riquinho, when they stopped fighting the Civil War.
This man, Riquinho, was so feared that the locals would not even look him in the eyes. When people served him food, they turned their faces away. That is the level of terror this man carried with him everywhere he went.
And this guy is so scary, they won't look him in his eyes. When they serve him, they go like this. The people there know who the hell he is.
Fat Joe said after about a week of being stuck in Angola, some people from the U.S. Embassy approached him at the hotel buffet. They handed him a card and asked if he was all right. Then they dropped a bomb on him.
And they're like, yo, you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm all right. Why? It was like, you know who you with, right? They said, this guy just kidnapped DMX too.
That is right. The same man holding Fat Joe had already done the exact same thing to DMX. He was snatching up American rappers and refusing to let them leave the country. The embassy gave Joe a number and told him they could extract him from a parking garage at any time. But Fat Joe, being who he is, was too proud to admit he was scared.
And I'm like, you know, I'm too tough about it. So I ain't want to let him know, yo, I'm ready to go now. I'm really kidnapped now. Like, this guy's playing with me.
And it was not just Fat Joe out there. Busta Rhymes was in Angola too, and according to Joe, Busta was starting to get a little too comfortable with the situation. Joe had to talk him down and remind him that they could disappear in that country and never make it back home.
Busta Rhymes was in there. Yo. It's like, yo, this guy's talking to me like this. I'm like, yo, Bust, this guy, you know, this guy kill people out here. We over here, man.
Joe had to keep Busta calm because they were in real danger.
So I'm talking them off the cliff, like, yo, Bust, like, chill, like, you know, we could disappear in this mother and never make it back.
2 weeks later, Riquinho finally let them go. Fat Joe made it home with the biggest check he had ever cashed, but the stress nearly broke him. And this was not a one-time thing for this promoter. Ja Rule told a similar story on Untold Stories of Hip Hop with Angie Martinez, confirming that Riquinho had pulled the same stunt on him and Fat Joe during a separate trip. The same promoter even caused an international incident with Nas in 2012, when his American promoter Patrick Alaco and his son were held at gunpoint for nearly 50 days after Nas did not show up for a New Year's Eve concert. Now here's where things get deep, because surviving a kidnapping overseas is one thing, but what Fat Joe went through with his own son Joey, that is the story that had the whole internet crying. Fat Joe was just 19 years old when Joey was born in the early 1990s. He and Joey's mother were not together. He described her as an old flame, somebody he reconnected with on a rainy day at his mother's house. She got pregnant, and even though Joe was not sure about the relationship, she insisted on keeping the baby. Then the day Joey was born, the doctors came in and delivered news that changed everything. They told Fat Joe, his parents, and the mother that Joey had Down syndrome, and it was going to be a big challenge. What happened next is the part that broke Fat Joe's heart. Joey's mother looked at the situation and said she could not handle it. She wanted to give him up for adoption. Fat Joe's mother was not having that. She went off. She told that woman in no uncertain terms that nobody was giving up her grandson. And then Joey's mother left. She walked out of that hospital, and according to Fat Joe, she never came back. Not once, not ever. On Club Shay Shay, Fat Joe laid it all out. He said he never saw Joey's mother again. She abandoned the kid. She never visited. Joey does not know any other family besides Joe and his grandparents, and the door was always open for her to come see her son, but she chose not to. Joey was later diagnosed with autism on top of the Down syndrome, and Fat Joe raised him with nothing but love and support from his own parents. And here's the thing about Joey that makes this story so powerful. Fat Joe says Joey is the happiest person he has ever known. He is never sad. He is always smiling, always full of joy. Fat Joe calls him his biggest blessing and says raising Joey taught him patience, gave him purpose, and made him a better man. In April 2022, Fat Joe went on ABC News during World Autism Awareness Month and talked about how Joey inspires him every single day. He called Joey his heart, his king, his everything, and he told families with special needs children to embrace them and show them love no matter what. Social media has been flooded with praise for Fat Joe's dedication, with people calling him an excellent father and one of the realest examples of what a man is supposed to do when life throws him a curveball. That praise has only grown louder since the Club Shay Shay interview went viral in late 2024 and continued circulating well into 2026. But as much as the world loves Fat Joe the father, not everybody in hip-hop has loved Fat Joe the rapper. And that brings us to the wars he fought in the streets and in the booth. Fat Joe's biggest beefs and family life. Now let us talk about the side of Fat Joe that earned him the nickname 300 Brolic, because for every heartwarming story about Joey, there is a story about Joe going to war with somebody in this rap game. And these were not little disagreements. These were full-blown beefs that lasted years, cost millions, and almost got people hurt. The biggest one was with 50 Cent. This thing kicked off in the mid-2000s when Fat Joe stayed loyal to Ja Rule during Ja's infamous war with 50 and G-Unit. Fat Joe and Ja Rule had already linked up on tracks like What's Love in 2002, and then Joe dropped New York with Jadakiss in 2004, which 50 took as a direct shot. 50 Cent fired back with Piggy Bank off the Massacre in 2005, going at Fat Joe and Jadakiss for riding with J. Rule. Fat Joe came back hard with My Fofo off his All or Nothing album that same year, calling 50 a coward. This beef was not just music. There were crew tensions at events, near violent confrontations, and it spilled over into business. Fat Joe has said the feud cost him a potential $20 million Air Jordan deal and a Reebok partnership. Think about that, $20 million gone because of rap beef. They did not squash it until around 2012 at a BET tribute for their mutual friend, Chris Lighty. Since then, Fat Joe has called 50 family and said they show each other love now. On the podcast, Fat Joe and Jadakiss talked about how the streets always had their back, no matter who they beefed with.
Now, I'm not going off the internet. I'm talking.
It's got to go back on where
I'm talking about hip hop, right? So what I'm saying to you is,
Joe was clear that no matter how many records 50 sold, the streets recognized real.
you went to the yard with the sword.
Answering your own question.
What's that?
He could sell 100 million.
The bars and the street credibility made sales numbers irrelevant in their eyes.
The bars and the power of the people in the street made all of that shit irrelevant.
Then there was the beef with Jay-Z, which was more low-key, but just as real. It started in the late 90s over a club incident at Club Carbon in New York, where Terror Squad and Rockefeller Crews got into it. Fat Joe admitted on Club Shay Shay that there was some jealousy involved. Jay-Z was winning at everything, had the baddest woman in the world, and was dominating the music business. And when Jay-Z showed up to the Rucker Park basketball tournament with a full squad after Joe had won 5 championships in a row, it rubbed him the wrong way.
A little bit of jealousy involved, you know what I'm saying? The man was always winning. I might have been a little jealous, and I'm gonna be a man about it.
Joe was honest about it. Jay had everything, and when he pulled up to the one thing Joe dominated, the streets, it got personal.
The Ruckus part of the streets.
Right.
That was the street, summertime. And out of nowhere, here come this guy after I win 5 chips in a row. He wants a team. I'm like, God, man, he won everything.
They eventually squashed it, and Joe has praised Jay-Z publicly since then. And then there was the time Roy Jones Jr., the actual boxing champion, pulled up to New York City to knock Fat Joe out in person. Joe had put a line in a song saying, even Roy Jones was forced to lean back, which he dropped right after Roy got knocked out by Antonio Tarver. Roy was not amused. He showed up to Ja Rule's release party with 8 guys, and his hype man Chopper Style screaming, knock him out, champ.
And I come off stage, and then and when I open the thing, he's standing there. But nobody see him. He's there with like 8 guys.
Fat Joe grabbed Roy's wrists and put his weight on the man's feet so he could not throw a punch. He tried to sweet talk his way out of it while Chopper Style kept egging Roy on.
So I'm like, yo, champ, let me that's just music, champ.
Right.
Champ, I'm trying to sweet talk him. Chopper Style's like, give it to him, champ.
Then Joe played his trump card. He pointed to the 150 Terror Squad guys in the building and told Roy straight up that they would not fight fair.
And I had to tell him, I said, yo, champ, you see those guys? It's 150 guys, Shannon.
Roy looked at them, asked if they were all with Joe, and then disappeared into the night. They squashed it over drinks at the Super Bowl in Jacksonville a week later. There was also the beef with Cuban Link after Big Pun passed in 2000, which involved alleged physical altercations and years of bad blood. And there were smaller scraps with Master Ace, Young Buck, and others that all added to Fat Joe's reputation as somebody you did not want to cross. But here is the wild part. Through all of that chaos, Fat Joe was going home every night to his family. He married Lorena Cartagena in 1995, and they are still together over 30 years later. They met in 1993 at a Miami nightclub through his manager Steve Lobel. Fat Joe has said they made an oath early on that no matter what came their way, they would always stay together, and they kept that promise. Together, they raised 3 children: Joey, his eldest with Down syndrome and autism; Ryan, his second son from another relationship, who moved in with Joe and Lorena around age 10, and Azariah, their daughter together, born in 2006. Lorena stepped into the role of mother for all 3 children and has been described as the backbone of the family. In the 2017 documentary Fat Joe: My Life, My Story, Lorena said Joe is very concerned with all of his kids and very in tune with what is going on in their lives. So you have a man who was beefing with 50 Cent, almost got knocked out by Roy Jones Jr., and survived a kidnapping in Africa, but he was also changing diapers, going to therapy appointments with Joey, and keeping a 30-year marriage strong. That is the contradiction of Fat Joe, and it is about to get even more complicated when you hear about his street ties and the lawsuit that just rocked his whole world. Fat Joe's street ties and explosive controversies. Fat Joe grew up in the Forest Houses projects in the Morrisania neighborhood of the Bronx. His father was Cuban, spoke no English, and spent time in jail. His mother was Puerto Rican. The neighborhood was predominantly black, and Joe grew up identifying with black hip-hop culture, even though he was Latino. He has admitted openly that he was stealing to support his family, bullying other kids, and dealing drugs as a teenager. After getting kicked out of his home following a fight with his father, the streets became his full-time occupation. He was riding around in MPVs with gold chains before he ever stepped into a recording booth. Now, when it comes to formal gang affiliation, there is no confirmed evidence that Fat Joe was ever a card-carrying member of any gang. He has never publicly claimed a set, but the rumors have followed him for decades. Online forums have long speculated that he was connected to the Latin Kings, given his Puerto Rican and Cuban roots and the Latin Kings' heavy presence in the Bronx during the 90s. He was also known to be close with Rudy Cato Rangel Jr., a Chicago Latin Kings leader who was killed in 2003. Fat Joe called him a beautiful dude in interviews. A John Gotti affiliate once described Fat Joe as having a serious street history and being one of the most respected and feared figures in all of New York hip-hop. He said Fat Joe could intimidate other gangster rappers, which is a statement that carries a lot of weight when you consider the era Joe came up in. Tony Yayo from G Unit backed this up, saying Fat Joe was not just respected, but genuinely feared in the streets, and the stories back it up. Fat Joe once told a story about being in Chicago when Kanye West called him because the Latinos and the black community were at war, and Kanye believed Joe was the only person who could stop it. Joe went out there and walked into a situation that was beyond dangerous.
Tell you something. I'm gonna tell you a true story, right? And I never said this publicly. One time I get a phone call. This is how much, I'm connected to Chicago.
Yeah. Kanye literally called this man to broker peace in Chicago. That is the kind of street influence Fat Joe carried.
One day I get a phone call, it's Kanye West. He said the Latinos and the black dudes was in the war. He said, you're the only one that can stop it.
Joe showed up to a venue where every gang imaginable was in the building and somebody had a machine gun on stage. It turned into a full-blown riot. But when things went sideways, instead of running, Joe told his DJ to play Lean Back, the #1 song in America at the time. And it worked. People stopped fighting and started dancing.
I said, yo, L, he said, what? Lean Back. Lean back.
That might be the most Fat Joe story ever told. A riot breaks out, and his response is to perform the hit record. As for Terror Squad, the group was not a gang. It was a hip-hop collective and record label that Joe founded in the late 90s, signed to Atlantic Records. Members included Big Pun, Cuban Link, Remy Ma, and the group worked with producers like DJ Khaled. But the name Terror Squad and the members' street backgrounds created a perception that blurred the lines. A 2018 school security document even listed Terror Squad under gang identity identifiers, associating it with Sereno gang colors, though this appears to be a case of street gangs adopting the imagery rather than any actual connection to the rap group. Then there was the legendary night at the Tunnel nightclub in New York when Fat Joe and Big Pun almost got destroyed by security. Joe told this story on Club Shay Shay, and it is one for the ages. Pun wanted to get into the club. The bouncers told him to take his boots off, and Pun at 580 pounds was not having it. The argument escalated to 10 security guards surrounding them.
I grabbed Pun at one time and I said, yo, Pun, you know we getting our ass whooped in here.
Joe knew they were about to catch a beating, but Pun wanted the smoke regardless. Then out of nowhere, at 2 in the morning, a voice rang out.
And out of nowhere you hear a voice like, yo, Pun, yo, Joe, these, we turn around. Iron Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson, fresh out of prison, took off his Gucci loafers and started chasing the head bouncer around a car, barefoot. The security was begging Fat Joe to stop Tyson. They did not want those hands from Iron Mike. Now let us get to the controversy that has everybody talking. In June 2025, Fat Joe's former hype man, Terrence T.A. Dixon, filed a $20 million federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York. The 157-page complaint alleges coercive labor exploitation, financial fraud, sexual manipulation, and violent intimidation over more than a decade from 2005 to 2022. Dixon claims Fat Joe forced him into thousands of sexual acts with women under duress and surveillance, with threats of being abandoned in foreign countries if he refused. The suit also alleges that Dixon witnessed Fat Joe engage in sexual relations with minors, including girls aged 15 and 16. Additional accusations include denial of songwriting credits on tracks like Lean Back, underpayment, and fraud. The lawsuit also names Roc Nation for allegedly concealing Dixon's royalty rights. Fat Joe did not sit back and wait. He preemptively sued Dixon in April 2025 for extortion and defamation after receiving demand letters calling the claims false and outrageous. His lawyer, Joe Tacopina, labeled the whole thing retaliation and complete fabrications. Fat Joe denied everything publicly, including on Instagram, saying the allegations are disgusting lies that attack his family man image. In a twist, Dixon's attorney Tyrone Blackburn was arrested in June 2025 for allegedly assaulting a process server with his vehicle during the case. As of 2026, the case remains ongoing with no resolution. This is not Joe's first legal trouble either. In December 2012, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of failing to file income tax returns on over $3.3 million in earnings and served 4 months in federal prison in Miami. He told a wild story about his time behind bars, including recruiting a white inmate nobody wanted and naming him Hong Kong Mongolia.
I got me an Italian chef. They had a chef down in the thing, Chef Junior. He wasn't, so don't think he was just a but he was my chef.
Even in prison, Joe was living like a boss with a personal chef making him homemade ice cream and linguine with clams.
So I said, my man, come with us, man. You eat with us, you with us. I gave him a name.
He took in this outcast inmate and turned him into his muscle. Classic Fat Joe. There were also assault arrests in 1998, with Big Pun involving a baseball bat and a gold chain, a 2002 fight at BB King's in Times Square where charges were dropped, and he was subpoenaed as a witness in both a 1994 Bronx shooting and a 2007 South Beach double murder. The Big Pun royalty dispute with Pun's widow, Liza Rios, over $2.3 million, was settled out of court in 2016, but resurfaced in 2021 over a biographical film, and the Fly Havana songwriting suit over All the Way Up was dismissed in 2022 but reopened in 2023. Fat Joe is a walking contradiction, a man who survived kidnappings, street wars, and prison, but who also raised a son with Down syndrome and autism with nothing but love, kept a 30-year marriage strong, and became one of hip-hop's most vocal advocates for special needs children. Whether you love him or question him, one thing is undeniable. There is nobody else in this game with a story like Fat Joe's. Nobody. That's all for today, fam. To stay updated with more of such content, be sure to click on the card showing on the screen.